Hello, welcome to our next goal setting lesson. So as you learned in our introduction video, I am quite passionate about goal setting, and really I think the way I look at it is goal setting is essentially the roadmap for athlete success. You know, we are based in Western Canada, and so I often will say to my athletes that I work with, all right, if we were to get in a car today and we wanted to go to Montreal, well, how are we going to get there? Or could you get there? And you know, a lot of them will say, yes, we could get there. You know, we just have to drive east, and that's all fantastic, but that's not really getting there. That's just knowing what direction it's in. And if we actually had to get in a car and drive there, and I say, okay, well, how long is it going to take you to get there? Where are you going to stop along the way? How long are you going to drive for before you take a rest? Where are you going to eat? All these things sort of get lost in that plan. So if we just got in a car and started driving, we could probably get there, let's be honest, but it's not going to be very efficient. We're going to have lots of stops along the way. We're probably going to get lost without a map, all right? And it's going to take us an awfully long time to get there because of all those times we get lost and the stops to get gas, the stops to get food. But if before we go, we sit down, we get a map or a GPS, we make a plan, we know how we're going to get there, we know where we're going to stop, we know how long we're going to take to get there, we know where we're going to sleep each night. Well, all of a sudden we have a much more efficient plan. It's a lot less stressful, you know, we're not going to get lost, and we know when we're achieving as we go along, we know how we're achieving our goal. We know that we're getting closer. So it helps to really to reduce the stress levels, and that's what goal setting is all about. Is not only is it about making a plan to achieve success, but it's about reducing the stress along the way and keeping the motivation along the way. So as we go through this, you're going to hear us talk about process goals and performance goals, what I call performance goals. A lot of other literature will refer to them as outcome goals, but I think performance goals encapsulates what we're talking about a little bit better. So performance goals are essentially your points, your scores, your victories, your results. They are numbers, stats, that sort of idea. And although we probably, all enjoy winning games or making, higher levels, we can't control that outcome. Performance goals are uncontrollable. And when we think about things in life, if they're uncontrollable, they create a lot of stress. And so although all of you want to win and we all want to have good outcomes or good performances, if we only focus on that, we have a lot of high stress that starts to happen. Now, process goals are the how. All right, they are the training we're going to focus on, the skills we're going to develop, the strategic plan to help us achieve that performance. And so when we focus on those, we have a lot more control, or we should have a lot more control over those factors of our performance. And so if we focus on that, it can help reduce anxiety, but still maintain motivation. Now, we can't just focus on process goals, just like we can't just focus on performance goals. It has to be a balance of the two. And when we have that appropriate balance, that's when we're feeling motivated because we're achieving results, we are feeling confident because we're getting better, and we aren't getting so disappointed because we have a system, essentially, that we are following. And that's what we really want you to take away from this. So this lesson is going to have a little bit more paperwork, and this module in general is going to have a little bit more paperwork and questions, more so than a lot of the other ones. And that's just because we really want to get you having a real solid plan with this. So the questions down below and in the attached PDF, the summary PDF, are designed to get you thinking about your goals, to have a good idea from when we actually fill out the goal setting package. So what I'd like you to do right now is grab or open up that goal setting package, print it out, have it in front of you, and grab the long-term goal setting plan and have that available. All right, now that you have that out and in front of you, it's important to remember you'll look at almost all those handouts that we've printed off have due dates or review dates on them. And it's important that you put these into a calendar, review them on a regular basis. That's the biggest thing with goal setting. Is all fun and dandy to spend some time writing out your goals right now, putting them aside, and then, great, what do you do now? Well, if you're just to leave them there and not look at them again, you've just wasted your time. But as long as we go back and we review them on a regular basis, well, then we can adjust them, we can modify what needs to happen in order to make sure that we are still on track for that goal-setting plan, or essentially on track to get to Montreal, like we said. All right, now that you have that long-term goal-setting sheet in front of you, you'll notice that it starts to have some due dates and some review dates. So all the handouts that we're going to give you have some sort of date component or time-related component to them. So it's very important you try and record these due dates or these review dates in a calendar somewhere so that you can review them on a regular basis. That regular review is really, really important. Now, so these long-term goals, these long-term or almost like a vision statement sort of idea are your dreams. So don't be afraid to put a really big challenging goal here. Maybe it's making the Olympics or becoming a professional athlete, or maybe if it's just making the next level for yourself. That's okay too, but don't be afraid to put a big challenge there. All right? We're not going to go into super detail about how yet, but we want to have a good idea of what that goal is. So spend some time. You'll notice there's only space for about one or two long-term goals on there, and that's really because we want to keep you focused on what's most important. It'd be very easy to sit there and write out 10 or 15 long-term goals, but I want you to pick, one or two of the most important, maybe four at most. If you want to print out a couple of copies, that's okay, but try and focus on just one or two to begin with. And then once that's done, you're comfortable with this process, you can start adding in some more if we need to. All right, so take a few moments, try and fill that out now, and then come back when you're ready to start the yearly goals. All right, now that we've completed your long-term goals, we're going to move on to our yearly goals. Now, let's say you're an Olympic athlete and you've set your long-term goal 4 years away. All right, well then for our yearly goals, we want to try and set some yearly goals for year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. That might be a little bit intimidating to begin with. So to start, just do your goals for this season or for the upcoming year. And then once you get through the whole entire package, you can go back and do the same process for year 2, year 3, year 4, and so on. So you'll start to notice that our yearly goals now have a little bit more space provided for information, some detail about the goal. We want to start adding in a little bit more detail. So you'll notice we've broken these goals down into what we call the 4 pillars of performance. So our mental skills, our physical skills, our tactical or strategic skills, and technical skills. So mental skills are any of the concepts you're essentially learning about or working on in this course, or from a mental skills or a sports psychology perspective. Your physical skills are anything that relates to your body. That could be strength, power, speed, nutrition, flexibility, hydration, incredibly important for athletes. Your tactical skills or strategic skills are more things like tactics that you might use in competition. So if you're in a team sport, typically coaches and managers will have a little bit more control of this, whereas in individual sports, it's up to you within your actual matches to decide what tactics you're going to use and apply against your opponent. So these are the kind of things we want you to set when it comes to these types of goals. And then your technical goals, that would be things like the actual techniques that you use. So if you're a hockey player, it might be your stick handling, or it might be your edge control. If you're a soccer player, it might be things like dribbling, passing, that kind of idea. So really the different components of your sport that allow you to execute the performance. Again, as you'll notice, we've limited how many goals we actually want you to set for each of these components. And that's really just to simplify the process and to give you some ideas so it doesn't get overwhelming in the beginning. Again, as before, once you've completed this and you want to add another page, double up the goals, or add 1 or 2 in one specific area, that's great, but make sure you go through the process first and just get comfortable with it before adding in any more details. So now, take some time, set your long-term goals, try and add in as much detail that will fit in the space. I don't need you to write an essay for every single goal, but try and add a good 1 or 2 sentences for each one. And then when you're done that, grab the monthly goals and we'll get started on that. All right, for our monthly goals section, there's one thing I just want to touch on before we move forward. So you'll probably notice that, again, we've only been focusing on those process goals. Don't be afraid to write down those performance goals as well, so those outcome measures. Maybe you want to win a certain tournament or you want to get a certain score. That's okay, just don't make that our sole focus. So maybe on the back of the page you might write out what some of those outcome goals might be for yourself, but really everything about those process goals should be set to help you achieve that performance goal. So same goes to the monthly goals. So for our monthly goals, now we're really going to start breaking things down to some key, tangible sort of to-do list type items. So make sure you put whatever month you're working on this, put that in the very top of the page. Then start figuring out what's the most important thing that you want to accomplish this month. So once you have that, write that down in the space. All right? And then those 4 short-term goals after it, we're going to break that monthly goal into kind of 4 almost like weekly goals. They don't have to be a week long, each one, but you should sort of conceptualize them as a weekly type format. So these are all components that put together, if you complete all 4 of those short-term goals, they should make that monthly goal easier to accomplish. All right, so it should be a smaller component, a little bit more detailed, and a little bit more of a step in that process. So for example, if your goal was, let's say, to increase your confidence over the month, well, one of those short-term goals might be, all right, I need to apply a mental skills plan into my training on a regular basis for 15 minutes per session. That would be more of an example of our short-term goal for each of those monthly goals. Now, those steps, I would suggest leave those until after you've completed the first 4 short-term goals. Then go back to each short-term goal and set 3 steps, or at least 2 to 3 steps for each of those short-term goals. These steps are very specific to-do list type items. They should be very tangible. So again, going back to our confidence example, if our monthly goal was to increase confidence, now our first short-term goal was to institute a mental skills plan into our training program, well then step number 1 might be to print off the handouts and put them in a binder in your training bag for training sessions. Step number 2 might be put a reminder in my calendar or my phone so to make sure that I'm actually following through with those mental skills. That sort of idea. So they're very tangible, concrete ideas. The due dates along the side should be done at the end. So once you have all your goals filled out, I want you to look at all those goals and say, all right, how long is this going to take me? So the due date or review date for each of those goals should be on or before the end of the month. So if your goal, for example, you're setting goals for October, well, all your goals should be finished before Halloween. So let's say that mental skills goal, you look at the steps, like, you know what, I can probably complete that in about a week. Well then, you'll put your goal a week from today. If you think it'll take you 3 weeks to get that done, it will be 3 weeks from today, and so on and so forth. So take some time, go through that right now, try and come up with your goals for the next month. When you're back, come back to the video and we'll talk about those training goals. Alright, so let's now move on to our training goals. The training goals are designed to be very specific, very simplistic, so you can accomplish those on a regular basis and not have to spend a lot of time doing this. So ideally, we want you to setting these goals, recording these successes and recording a mistake to work on pretty much for every training session. So if this is taking longer than maybe about 5 minutes at the beginning of the session or a few minutes at the end, it's taking too long. So really try and streamline this process, and it doesn't have to be done right before training. If it's easier to do in the morning or an hour or two before your practice session, that's okay. The process is not about when you do this, it's more about that you are actually doing it and completing the goal setting. So for every practice, what we want you to do is set 2 goals for that practice. Now again, remember, these should be process goals, not outcome goals. So more of the how, not the actual result. So once you've set those 2 goals, then after the practice, I'd like you to go and record what were 2 successes from the practice. What were 2 things you did well? It's very important to recognize those successes. You'll learn that in further modules, why it's so important to recognize those successes. And on the flip side of that, we also want you to record what was one thing you need to improve on, or what one thing that needs to be fixed. All right? That will become the basis, hopefully, for one of your future goals in the next training sessions. Now, you'll also notice a chart on the right-hand side of that page. So in that chart, we want you to come up with 12 things that you want to keep track of during the week. So that might be your hydration levels. It might be your flexibility. It might be a specific tactic you've been practicing in your training sessions. It might be a specific technique, so maybe your stick handling again, or that dribbling thing that we talked about earlier. But pick 12 things that are important to you, and then for each training session, you're going to score it on a scale from 1 to 10. So 10 would be the best, 1 would be the lowest. So a 10 would be excellent. So let's say you were recording confidence as an example. So, oh, I felt really great and my confidence was really fantastic this last training session. 10. Or, oh man, I made a couple mistakes. I was just really frustrated. I wasn't really feeling it. I wasn't really confident in myself. It was more like a 3. So keep track of that. Ideally, and I think you probably agree, we want to see those numbers improve week by week or stay at high levels. Now, if you find that over the week you've had 10s across the board, that's probably a factor that maybe we don't need to keep track of so much. I would say the exceptions to that might be things like confidence, like hydration, like flexibility, because those are just something that are really important for athletes regardless of what sport you're doing and regardless of how they're going throughout that process, or something that needs to have some ongoing review. All right? So take some time. Think about your next practice. Try and fill in your 2 goals for that session, as well as what 12 things you're going to keep track of. And then after that practice, come back, try and do that review of the successes as well as the mistake. Some athletes do better doing that right after, immediately after the practice. Other athletes, they'll fill it in the next time for their, what I would often suggest, do it your next practice. So you'll set, let's say you have a practice on Monday. You set your goals for Monday, but then you have your next practice on Wednesday. Well, when you get to training on Wednesday, that's when you think about, okay, what were 2 successes from last day? What was one thing I need to improve on? Set your goals, record your previous training sessions, successes and mistake, and score yourself, and then continue that process throughout the rest of the week. So, it's really important, once we have a bit of this goal setting plan established, that you do it on an ongoing basis. Goal setting can become very tedious, but if you set the right goals for yourself, if you're writing down things that are very important to you, you will be motivated, you'll be excited to do this. That's the key. If you're starting to get bored or you're starting to miss recording some of your goals, you're probably writing down the wrong goals. So spend some time really focusing on something that's going to be effective and motivating for you. I would also suggest going back and watching and listening to this video again on probably a monthly basis, just to make sure you're keeping yourself accountable and getting into the habit of setting these goals on a regular basis. Enjoy.